In this video, I'm going to show how you can use Docker to set up an Elasticsearch cluster with 3 nodes. Before you watch this video, you should have a good understanding of how to manually set up an Elasticsearch cluster, and you should have a good understanding of how to use Docker to set up a single Elasticsearch node instance. If you're not sure about these, I have 2 videos that will explain all of this. I will leave links to both videos in the description of this video. After watching this video, you might want to experiment with adding more services to your cluster, such as a fleet server, APM, Metricbeat, Filebeat, and Logstash. This video here shows how you can do it with a single Elasticsearch node in a Docker environment. And this video here in our members playlist shows how you can do the same thing, but with an Elastic cluster of many nodes within a Docker environment. The member videos do require a paid monthly subscription, but you can cancel at any time. Before we begin, remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find these videos helpful. If you run into any issues, just reach out to us through our website. Now let's get started. If you want to use Docker to set up an Elasticsearch cluster with a few nodes in it, it's a pretty straightforward process. In fact, you can find the information and the instructions on the Elasticsearch documentation. They even provide you with the 2 files you need to get up and running, an environment file and the Docker Compose YAML file. Although it's in their GitHub projects or in their GitHub repository, I've actually downloaded these files and put them to my own GitHub repository. That way I never lose them and we can reference it from this video. So I think what we'll do is maybe we'll just go ahead and do a quick demonstration before I explain the code in these files. I have an Ubuntu machine here in my office network. It's on version 22.04. And if I look at the IP address, I can reference this machine with the 192.168.88.234 IP address. And what I'll do is, because it's a completely new machine, I'm just gonna do a few updates. So I'll do the distribution upgrades as well. Upgrades, automatically accept yes to everything. And I will also apt-get install. I like to use Vim as my text editor. We're probably going to need curl at some point in time, and we're going to need Git. And just for fun, I'm going to include NewPG and GPG libraries in case we ever really need to reference them. Oh, and we'll also need Docker and Docker Compose. So let me grab all that, and I'm going to pause until everything is installed. I'm just going to accept any defaults if prompted about various configurations. I'll just accept the defaults. Okay, all the installations are done. I had a typing mistake where I put the letter S, but once I corrected it to without the letter S, then everything installed properly. So with all that done, let's make a new directory. I'll just call it cluster. You can call it anything you want. And we're going to check out this project and to download these 2 files. So I'll just copy this, add origin, paste in the URL, git fetch, and we will git checkout master. And just like that, we should have all the files we need, which is simply the Docker Compose file and the environment file. Before we run anything, we should really take a look at this README file. And the thing that we have to pay attention to here is setting this parameter here, vm.maxMapCount. Now, it's possible that not all systems will need it. I just know that in all the environments I've worked in, I seem to need to set this max map count variable. It is explained in the Elasticsearch documentation just a little bit over here. And I won't pretend to know what this field does. I just think it has something to do with memory. And of course, you can always Google to understand what this all means. All I know is, I'll just run this command before I do anything else. Okay. Now, we can pretty much just get started. I'll just do Docker Compose up, build-d. And once things are up, we'll log in, take a look around before I explain all the code in the Docker Compose YAML file and in the environment file. All right, things are finally up, but I made a few mistakes. So I think a few seconds ago, I didn't set the max map count properly. I used a number that was too low. So I increased it to this, which is the number I put in my README. And if this number is not enough, you'll see errors like this. So I did a Docker logs on one of the failed containers, and you'll see messages like here, right? You'll see the exact error stating that you don't have enough maximum virtual memory areas, and you'll see things like native controller process has stopped. So I went ahead and applied the appropriate value to max map count. Then I did Docker compose down, remove orphans, and remove the volumes. So completely getting rid of the Docker environment, and then build, and now it looks like everything is up. So if I do docker ps-a, sorry, my screen's a bit too small, so I'm going to format this a little bit better. So I'm going to format the ps command with, I want a table format and just show these columns. And for these columns, you can always go to the Docker website. These are the placeholders that you can use in those curly braces. All right, so this is pretty good. The setup, this setup container is only meant for setting up TLS certificates to initialize your 3 nodes and Kibana. So now we can just go to the IP address of this machine. So let's figure out what that is. So that's this on port 5601 in our web browser, and we should be able to see Kibana. So I typed in the IP address, port 5601, and it redirected me to login. There is no TLS right now, but if you ever watch any of my other videos, you'll see how I set up TLS for Kibana within a Docker environment. I'll reference to those videos in a moment. But for now, let's just log in. And the password is whatever is in our environment file, which is change me. All right, looks like we're in, and we can quickly check how many nodes in the cluster by running a command like this. I will do a get _cat nodes, and you can see 3 different nodes in our cluster. And we can do a quick test. We can create an index, put a document in the index, and then see which shards or nodes this index is allocated to. Okay, and let's put a document in that index. I'll just keep it simple and just say name, pizza, insert this document, and let's do a get test shards. Okay, you can see it's on node 3 and node 1. Okay. And that's pretty much all there is to setting up an Elasticsearch cluster with Docker. At this point, let's take a look at the code to see how this all works. We'll start with the environment file. As you know, when you set up an Elasticsearch cluster or even one single Elasticsearch node, there will be the Elastic super user, and the password we're going to set is change me. And as you also know from our previous videos on setting up Elasticsearch with Kibana, Kibana needs to connect to Elasticsearch with a Kibana user. And this is a default username, and we'll set this password. We're using this stack version. The name of our cluster is going to be Docker cluster. We'll use the free version of this whole platform. Elasticsearch is going to be on port 9200. Kibana is going to be on port 5601. And for each of the containers in our Docker compose file, we'll limit the memory usage for each container to this amount here. So that's the environment file. Now let's take a look at the actual Docker compose YAML file. So let me summarize high level what this Docker compose file will do. There's only a few services in here, not many. The first one is a setup service. This setup service will set up TLS certificates that each of the Elasticsearch nodes and Kibana will need. So Kibana and Elasticsearch can't run without the the TLS certificates. So this service will set up the TLS certificates, and then you go to each of the individual Elasticsearch nodes. And each of these nodes, you can see it's really just first using the TLS certificates made in the previous service, and then setting many of the variables you see in your Elasticsearch YAML file, which we've discussed at length in many of our other videos. And then you see that Elasticsearch node number 2, exactly the same setup. And then node 3, exactly the same setup. And then followed by Kibana, where we are setting up, Kibana needs to wait for all 3 Elasticsearch nodes to be healthy before it attempts to connect to it. And these are some of the Kibana variables that we'll need to set. So that's pretty much it, just really 3 services in reality: the setup service, 3 Elasticsearch node services, which I just think of as one service, and then the Kibana service. So now we can go into more detail about each of these individual services. So let's start with the setup service. And if you've watched any of my other Docker Compose and Elasticsearch videos, you'll see that this bash script here to create TLS certificates, you'll have noticed me using it over and over and over again. So I won't go into too much detail on what this does. In fact, let me just go over to my YouTube channel quickly. So you can see there's a playlist here, Elasticsearch Docker Compose. If you open it up, you'll see a lot of different videos doing exactly the same thing. Maybe this video will explain the most in depth about how to use Docker Compose and Elasticsearch, and I'll probably explain this script a lot more in detail. If not this video, any of these other videos would do the same thing. But let me just quickly go over what this bash script does here. First thing we do is just make sure that there is an Elastic password in the environment file. If not, exit. Make sure we have a Kibana password. If not, then exit. And before we can run Elasticsearch, we need TLS certificates. And those TLS certificates need to be signed by a certificate authority. So we need to create the files for the certificate authority first. And the certificate authority files are the private key and a TLS certificate. What we're saying with this if statement here is if it does not exist, then go ahead and create it. That's because there's a possibility it could exist from a previous instance or previous execution of Docker Compose up. So if you already ran Docker Compose up, you already have your volumes created, no need to overwrite or recreate these CA certificates, right? So that's why there's an if statement here. Once we have the CA files, we actually need to make the TLS certificates for node 1, node 2, and node 3. Only if it doesn't exist yet, right? So just like this if statement here, if we've already created the TLS certificates from a previous Docker Compose up execution, no need to overwrite the certificates that we already have. But if it doesn't exist because we're running this for the first time, go ahead and use the Elasticsearch certutil command to create TLS certificates for all 3 of these. And then they will be saved to a volume within the directory config cert.zip. We'll go ahead and change some of the permissions around these certificate files. And then this setup service is going to wait until one of the Elasticsearch nodes is up, in this case ES01. And once it is up, then we basically just shut down this setup container altogether. And that's because we don't need this container hanging around in the background eating up memory. It served its purpose for just creating TLS certificates. Once it's done that and Elasticsearch is up, we can shut down this container. So that's all this does, right? So you can see the health check here is whether these certificates actually exist, right? One other thing I should mention is the volumes. So you can see that in the setup service, we bind or we mount in the container itself, there's a certs directory, but in the container itself, there's this directory, but it maps to this volume, and this volume is declared at the bottom over here. So it's just a local volume, and this certs volume is used by every single one of the Kibana and Elasticsearch services or containers. So you can see here, inside the container, this directory maps to this volume. And that way, Kibana has access to the certificate authority files and the Elasticsearch TLS certificates. Same thing with every single one of these Elasticsearch nodes. This directory here maps to this volume so that it can access the TLS certificates that was made in the setup container. Okay, so that's basically what this setup service is all about. So let's move on to the next service. So this first service here is the first Elasticsearch node. It's going to be using the service name ES01, and we wait until the setup service above is healthy before we run this container. Again, it's healthy if this test evaluates to true, meaning if the TLS certificates for node 1 has been made. All right, so once that's been made, we go ahead and run ES01 on port 9200 internally, but also to the public facing world. We will use this value specified in our environment file, which at this point in time is 9200. Then we go ahead and configure basically all the options that we need to configure for the Elasticsearch YAML file. This is the only one that's not explicitly stated in the elasticsearch.yaml file, but all these other ones are. And we've discussed at length every one of these options in my earlier videos. In fact, if you go back to my YouTube channel, and let's say you click on Elasticsearch Cluster, what we'll get is the first video in this playlist is this 1-hour video. In here, we'll explain all the options you need to be aware of for the Elasticsearch YAML file. But if you don't want to watch 1 hour worth of video, I have a summarized write-up of that video here. And you can see it's really just these few properties that we need to edit. All right, so that would reference these ones. In fact, I'll just quickly go through it. Node name, the cluster, the name of the cluster that you're spinning up. And when you're setting up Elasticsearch for the first time, both node 1, 2, and 3 will be initial master nodes. But on subsequent restarts of Docker Compose, or if this node fails and needs to rejoin the cluster, it'll depend on 2 and 3 to join the cluster. Right? Just some memory settings, and then the TLS certificates. So this, I get a lot of emails and questions and requests through LinkedIn and Facebook around issues related to TLS certificates. Now, we did set up the TLS certificates using the Elasticsearch utils command that comes with Elasticsearch. So over here, right? So we could use this script to create TLS certificates, but as you know, there's so many different ways to create TLS certificates, whether you use OpenSL or whether you use key tools, whether you're creating PM format or P12 files. There's just so many different ways. So I get so many emails around all the different configuration options. And because of that, I don't want to repeat myself. Therefore, I create this members list or members area. If you click on it, in here, I have at least 3 or 4 different videos showing the most popular ways or popular requests from people on creating TLS certificates for their Elasticsearch cluster. So for example, in this almost 1 hour video, someone asked me, how do you create TLS certificates with OpenSL to create your own private CA, but for the HTTP protocol? So that would be this protocol here. And then I've been asked again, how about the transport protocol? So there's 4 different versions of it. So transport protocol is just for the node to node communication within the Elasticsearch. They asked, okay, well, what if we need to use OpenSL to create PEM files? All right, well, that's this video. What if we want to use OpenSL and key tool to create P12 files? Well, that's this video. What if we want to use Elasticsearch to recreate our own P12 or PEM files? Well, that's this video. What if we want to use Let's Encrypt or publicly signed certificates? Well, that's this video. So if you really need all these other options, or you're running into issues using different types of TLS certificates for these protocols here, maybe one of these videos will help out for you. Okay, so that's what's happening here. All right, and then we consider node 1 healthy if we can curl the REST API of node 1 and get a response, and if that response doesn't have the text missing authentication credentials. If you scroll to node 2, it's exactly the same as node 1, except we just say if node 2 fails and it needs to rejoin the cluster, then we look up node 1 and node 3 to get the information necessary to join the cluster. Otherwise, yeah, just TLS certificate settings, just like the service above. And ES03, exactly the same, but we just changed the seed host here, where if 3 fails, then we look up 1 and 2 as the entry nodes or the seed host nodes. And finally, we have Kibana. So Kibana is pretty straightforward. Just wait for all 3 nodes to be up. And once it is up, then we'll connect to Elasticsearch based on node 1, supply the Kibana password, reference the certificate authorities needed to verify the TLS certificates for ES01 and 2 and 3. And that's pretty much it. So you can see these were the volumes that were defined for every single one of the services above. And I would say that's pretty much all there is when it comes to setting up Elasticsearch Cluster using Docker to set up an Elasticsearch Cluster. So where you can go at this point is you can try adding additional services to your Docker Compose if you want to. I have 2 other videos here showing that, where after you've set up, after you've run all this, well, you can also add APM, Beats, Logstash into your Docker Compose as well. Now, I already have the code completed for both these videos, so you can just download them if you want. Or if you want to try it yourself, just watch this. Let's go to this playlist. You can always try to, this video just sets up a single Elasticsearch instance. You can just upgrade the Docker Compose file here to have multiple Elasticsearch instances. All right. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you do, just press like help me press like to support the video. And if you have any other questions, it's better for you to email me through our website. So let me pull up our website. Okay, so if you have any problems, easiest if you message me through the website, because the YouTube comments don't really always show me everything. If you have any other questions, let me know.